All right, we're live. How you doing, Barry?
I'm doing good, Brian. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm good. So, everybody, this is Barry Weller with Barry Weller
Very well at
Properties.
properties now. I've got my own little one-man brokerage.
Fantastic. So, just tell us a little bit about yourself because I think you have some experience. You've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, so I got into business. I've been in business since 1985. I was in the home building business for 30 years, and I ran sales and marketing operations for big home builders. I was a
Yeah.
broker. I've been a broker, been a licensed agent since about, I don't know, 87 or 88, and a broker for, about 20 years. Been doing general brokerage since 2014.
All
Um,
right.
so
So, you have seen some dips, some ups and downs. You've seen some
yeah,
changes, and I'm sure you've heard the rumors over the years about um, the MLS giving up the information to Zillow is going to blow up our business and ruin the business. And then uh, Zillow is going to start a brokerage that's going to ruin our business. Redfin's going to ruin our business. Everybody's been coming for the realtor business for as long as I've been. I was in the mortgage business in 09 and then real estate agent in 2014. So I'm 10 years in June, and it was a lot different when I started. It was a buyer's market for the first 5 years, and then a seller's market's been getting more and more tilted that way in the past 5 years. So you've seen some stuff. What is your opinion on how this particular chain of events will actually affect the industry versus all the other times we've heard about this is going to change everything?
well, yeah, I don't believe this is going to change everything. I think it's going
Really?
to change the way that we operate. It's going to change, the way buyers and sellers approach. Keep in mind, when I started in the business, there was no such thing as buyer brokerage in Maryland and most states. Everybody worked for the seller. Everybody's agency derived from the listing agent, and everybody's fiduciary was to the seller. And it and
So so
then
so
state
are you
encouraged.
saying that there was no buyer's agency like there was no legal representative called a buyer's agent, or was just there
That is,
was
there was
literally
no
no
legal
buyer's agent?
representative. There was no. Everybody's fiduciary was to the seller. All the
Okay.
agency flowed from the seller side. Buyers were unrepresented. And what happened is they would have agents that would take them around some houses, and they thought those agents were working for them. So there was a big move by the real estate commission back in the late 80s and early 90s to encourage buyer brokerage.
Yep.
And they weren't really sure how to do it. Other states had just started it. And then buyer brokerage developed the way it had, where um, you know, listing commissions were shared with buyer, the way it became over the years. But yeah, back in the very, very beginning, agents were what they were called co-op agents. And they were co-oping with the listing broker, and all that agency flowed from the listing side. Then it became, the buyer brokers were very, very commonplace. And what we've dealt with, for the last 20 years, that was all intended to give voice to buyers and give representation to buyers who were kind of just out there on their own before.
So back before there was official buyer broker representation, how did the person driving around the buyer get compensated? It was through a sub agency
It was
of the
through sub
listing
agents
agent.
with the listing agent. If it flowed out of it was always a sharing of the listing commission, but the difference was really about how the fiduciary worked, who you owed loyalty and duty to as a client versus who you just owed fairness. So you
All
had to
right.
always
So,
be fair with
well,
buyers.
let me just clarify a little bit because these are words, these are industry words that the average
That's right.
person might
Yeah.
not understand. So, a fiduciary means you have a legal responsibility, like a legal responsibility to protect the interest. So today, when you represent a buyer, you have a buyer's agency agreement. You have the fiduciary responsibility. Just means you have the at every point in time, you're always obligated to protect the interest of your client. So if you're representing a listing and the listing seller says to you, I'll take this or I'll agree to that, you're not allowed to say that to a buyer who walks in the front door. And
Correct.
as a buyer's agent, if you know through conversation or something that this, that, or the other, and it's going to help your buyer client, you're obligated to tell them that. And you're always obligated to keep that person's interest in mind. So it's very clear in today's world prior to what's coming up. If you work for a buyer, you're always protecting the buyer. And if you work for a seller, you're always protecting the seller. In the state of Maryland, you're not legally allowed to represent a buyer and a seller. So if you're a listing agent and a buyer calls you and wants to purchase a property, you always protect the seller in all situations. If the buyer
Right.
says, I'll pay this amount of money or I'll take this or I'll take that, you can go back and say it to the seller. Hey, they said they would do this. And if the seller says, well, I would agree to do this or do that, you're not allowed to go back and say that to the buyer. So I'll just clarifying.
And you always have to disclose to the buyer in today, you have to say to them, you have to be aware I work for the seller. I can help you, but I can't represent you. You have
Right.
to be very crystal clear so that everybody knows, what the story is.
Right. So having said all that, the fact that there used to be no buyer's agency and we are faced with this situation, and just so people are aware, it's not approved yet. I'm not an attorney. Barry's not an attorney. We don't play one on TV. We're not giving you
Nope,
legal advice. This is
nope.
our opinion and our understanding of what we've read. Um, there has been an agreement that has not been agreed to by a judge yet, so it's not official. But one of the things they're going to do is prevent um, sellers or prevent real estate agents from advertising buyer commission to the buyer's agent. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't do it. It's very fuzzy, and I just got off the EXP official, announcement of how we're handling this. I've read the NAR email. I've read the MAR, National Association of Realtors, Maryland Association of Realtors. And unless you've read something different, Barry, it seems like everybody says we're going to have to work this out. We don't know what we're going to do. Is that what you're
Right.
reading?
Yeah, yeah. That we're going to kind of work our way through it for sure. In the MLS, the part about uh, buyer broker commissions is just going to go away. So you're not going to have an option to put that in there. Um, the MAR newsletter that I saw that made the most sense to me, and it was just one line that said, essentially, we're going to do it like we do commercial deals.
That
And
was a
I used
proposal.
commercial business, so that made perfect sense.
And can you explain what that is? Because I think I'm not clear on exactly how that works.
Yeah, when you do a commercial deal, in the systems that we use to advertise commercial real estate, there's no place where we make an offer of sharing commission or anything like that. So when you're working on a commercial deal and you're representing a tenant or a buyer, when you make that phone call to the listing agent, one of the first questions you ask is there compensation for the buyer's agent? And they'll tell you, yes, there is, or no, there isn't. And if there is, how much? And
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 what's typical? Do you know?
it varies. It depends on the kind of property. I mean, it varies to the same kind of percentages. In general, it's around the same kind of percentages that we work with in residential. But when you've got a really, really low priced, the example I give people is I've sold bulk lots at Linganore, where the lots were 20,000 a piece, and I charge 10% for those.
Right.
If and here's the other thing I'll tell you: when you do an 80 lot land deal, as bad as you might want to, you're not going to get paid 2.5 or 3%, or 100 lot land deal. So the or a $15 million building or something like that,
Right.
it truly gets negotiated out in the deal by both parties because again, it's a little more sophisticated
That
and
sounds good, Barry, but let me ask you,
it's
what is
not.
the
It's not.
primary
It, well,
what's the
uh,
primary difference between a commercial transaction and a first-time home buyer?
the parties are so much more sophisticated, and it's a business transaction. That's where the big deal. I mean, these are business people, and you're talking about big deals, and they're going to say, "Listen, I want to take care of the broker, but I'm not going to pay him $500,000." So it's very business oriented. When you're dealing with residential customers, I've already started having this conversation with some of my listing clients about how this thing's going to change, and you
Mhm.
can see their eyes glaze over as you start to explain this, they're just like, "Oh my god, this is really complicated, Barry." And you have to sort of, in general, most of your residential clients
Okay, I agree with
know
you
what I'm
that
saying?
that they don't do business, in this way. They're not familiar with this idea or how it works. And I would say the other major primary difference is the amount of money these people have set aside for such things. People that are buying businesses hire attorneys, they pay a ton of money.
Oh yeah, there's all kind of
They
engineers
have
and what.
accountants that are looking through things. There's a lot of money being spent, and this is just another expense. And to some extent, there are sort of customary things that buyers are normally paying. They're normally paying title companies. They don't, negotiate the title company fees normally. They're normally paying lender fees. They don't normally negotiate those fees. They normally pay a home inspector. They don't negotiate those fees.
Right.
And they don't have the money to pay a buyer's agent in most cases. I mean, I was a lender for 5 years. Calvert County in Southern Maryland is like Calvert County is the 8th richest county in our country, and most people don't buy houses with an extra 10,000, $20,000 set aside to pay for some representation.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I think the buyer side is going to change a lot. Um, and some of it is going to be those unintended consequences where you'll have more buyers potentially go unrepresented, and after that goes on for a year or two, that'll turn out horribly, and we'll probably end up back at square one looking at how this is. And the other part I think that's going to happen is sellers are still allowed to offer compensation to the buyer agent. They just can't put it in MLS. So I think there'll be some of that. Or sellers will probably develop a mentality, just like they do with seller contributions towards closing cost, where, depending on the product and the market, you might say to them, hey, these first time buyers need help
Okay.
because they don't
So
have enough
so let
money
me
to
just throw
close.
this out here because I agree with everything you're saying. Um, I will challenge your very first statement that this is not going to change things very much. I think it's changing everything quite a bit. But we are in a long-term seller's market. I feel like that, you know, price is a set by the force of supply and demand. There is nothing that is going to solve the challenge of the number of human beings who want to buy a house in America and the number of houses available is not going to resolve itself anytime soon. And therefore, the sellers are going to be in a very strong position for a long period of time. That being said, if they're faced with a situation where they're looking at offers, they're going to always take whatever is in their best interest. And if a buyer is submitting an offer with a real estate agent who wants 2.5 or 2 or 3%, and another client is not, there's zero chance that they're going to take an offer because they feel like the value of that person who's got a fiduciary responsibility to that person is going to help them in any way that's worth paying them that amount of money.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you there. The only caveat I'd throw out there is we have seen, you're right about the demand. There's more people that want to buy than there are houses to buy. We've got a structural deficit of housing. We're 10 million units short in the country, I think.
Yep.
But we have seen, as interest rates have gone up, there's a difference in wanting to buy a house and being able to buy a house.
Right.
So what we've seen as interest rates have gone from 2.5 to 7 is a lot of the people that want to buy a house can't. That just can't make the numbers work.
Yeah.
So yes, houses are still selling. They're selling quickly, but I don't think we're seeing the run ups. And I have seen price reductions in
Yeah.
certain price ranges in certain areas. So even with that shortage, the one thing that's different about housing than other, just the widgets we learned about in business school is that you've got this issue of financing and mortgage rates that that or act as a governor when the rates start to get high to slow things.
Okay. So y-
So so
that's
yes,
true.
everything you said is true, but there comes a time when the seller can't get any more, or the seller's not going to have certain product types. When they have multiple offers, look, they're going to take the deal that they don't have to make a seller contribution, they don't have to pay. I was hearing stories a year ago in the real competitive market that buyers, now again, well-heeled buyers in upper price ranges, but as a way to try to shift cost from the seller to the buyer, buyers at that time were offering to pay their own buyer commission so that the seller could recognize a higher, to make their offer stand out.
I just went through one where the buyer paid for the seller's closing costs to
Yeah,
the tune
that
of, yeah, to the tune of like $7,000. And then they let the seller live there for free.
yeah.
So what I feel like is the pressure on the market is going to prevent a scenario where it's likely that buyers agents are going to be able to take any money from buyers. I just don't feel like a buyer who's okay. So a buyer's buying a house, they've saved up this down payment money, and then surprise, surprise, there's something called closing costs, another 3.5%.
Right.
They got to come up with that money. How much money are they going to pay to have somebody represent them? And this is where it's just so challenging. My theory is that maybe if you're buying a condo in Upper East Side New York and you don't mind paying somebody to go find it for you, make sure you get the right one. But if you're a first time home buyer or somebody struggling
Right.
who did not just sell a house and has 100 grand in the bank, or even if you did, um, they're just not going to be able to find it in their heart to want to pay thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to have a buyer's agent represent them.
No, here's what and with the first time buyers, they're going to be the biggest crunch because, as you said, they don't have the extra cash, period. But I do believe on the buyer's side, well, I'll tell you what my company is going to migrate to. And I think you're going to see a lot of this. I don't do a lot of buyers because I work mostly from referral. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a flat fee. And then that flat fee is going to be adjusted. Most of my buyers anymore find the houses through the various platforms and send them to me and say, these are the ones I want to see.
Sure.
So we'll talk, and the market's changed in that way, because it used to be we would set up the searches, and I'm always one that I like to comb through them by hand. I don't
Right.
like to just send out the automatic search. So I just did a client last week, a buyer, that it was that way. They wanted me to find them and send them to them, and I was happy to do that. But most times, the buyers are going to send me the listing, say these are the ones I want to see. Our deal is going to be, we're going to have a flat fee, and for that flat fee, can I say what it is? Am I allowed
I
to? Are
don't
we
see
allowed?
why not. You're the owner of the company.
I don't know if we're allowed to say, but it's going to be around $5,000. And for $5,000, we're going to show you 10 houses, and we're going to write 5 offers. And if you need to see more than 10 houses, or we have to write more than 5 offers, then there's going to be an adjustment based on the amount of time we put into it.
So what's your
One,
average sales price where you're at?
oh, 5,500, something like that.
Okay, so what you were normally making on that transaction for $500,000 was $12,500, and now you're going to be agreeing to take $5,000.
That's correct.
So if you're a buyer's agent, that's a challenging scenario, and that's assuming you were getting paid 2.5%. There is no standard amount, but that's generally what
But
I
I've
see.
also, I've done lot deals before where I got less than 1% on them, because that's what I was was negotiated on big
Sure.
deals.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the way, yes, that's what's going to happen. If you want to, that's what I think is going to happen. If you want to be involved as a buyer broker, and the way I kind of look at it is, back in 1900, there were lots of guys that made their living making wagon wheels and repairing wagon wheels. And when the cars came along, these guys couldn't make a living doing wagon wheels anymore.
Yep.
And we've seen that 100 times since then, right? With all kinds of different technology.
Exactly. So the title of this video in the description said, is the real estate industry going to go the way of Blockbuster or taxi cabs? Taxi cabs 20 years ago in New York City, I think it was $100,000 you had to pay just to buy the license,
Yeah, the medallion. Yeah.
the medallion. And then, within 24 months, those were worthless. And taxi cabs are gone. You can't, I think you can still get a taxi, but I don't know why you would. You're just going to get an Uber. And I think the last Blockbuster just went out of business, but realistically, Blockbuster went out of business 15 years ago. And I mean, gone.
Going.
So,
I told one of my kids is studying business in college. He's a junior. And a couple of years ago, his mother's in real estate and I'm in real estate. And he made a mention about, maybe I get into real estate like you guys. And what I said to him was, 20 or 25 years from now, I don't think you're going to be able to make a living as a residential real estate agent. And I still believe that. Commercial land, specialty stuff. But once they figure out a way to handle the security, and there will be a technology, particularly, on the buyer side, a lot of people, even though they do need to have somebody negotiate and represent them, a lot of people don't think they do. And
well, I'm going to say a lot of people don't think they do. And this is the point that I made. The option to sell your house is available today. I mean, there
correct,
are about 500,000 websites you can go to. You can do it for free on Zillow. You can do it through $500 websites, $9.99 websites. There's been every option to do this forever. So I'm gonna disagree with you just a little bit on whether or not this will go away completely. And tell me if you think that this is accurate. When a home seller, and that's how I also represent, like I'm 90% uh, sellers and whatever 10% buyers right now.
Right.
When a home seller is faced with selling the home that they live in, that they sleep in, that their children sleep in, to allow strangers to come in, I believe that Americans have adopted a British mannerism in the sense that in other countries, it's very common to go to the market and pick up a loaf of bread and then scream at the other person about how much you're going to pay for it, right? In America, we don't have that level of comfortability. And when it comes to your largest financial asset, think about this as if you're going to take your retirement, which in many people's cases, your house is a large part of that retirement. And you're going to go down to an Edward Jones or you're going to call a stockbroker. There's a level of trust that you have to have with that person, and you don't necessarily want to make those decisions by yourself. There's a need to bring in somebody who does this all the time, who knows what to expect, what's realistic, how to handle this, because if you screw it up, there's a lot of money that is lost. People think that overpricing your house is the worst thing you can do. I would say, what about underpricing your house? What if you just, hey, I think I'd take 500 for it. What if it's worth 600 and you just sold it for
Well, and
500?
and what about, and you know what? I stand corrected. I think you make a great point. The the listing side, it's going to be hard to replace what we do. And
Yeah,
most people understand, the most sophisticated buyers, my most sophisticated clients, understand the value I bring on the listing. You're right about that. The buyer side, yeah, is, I think, where it's going to fade a little bit. But you're 1,000% right. On the listing side, when you come in and you advise them, here are the things that you do to your house to get value. Here are the things I
mhm,
would bother with, and the marketing knowledge that we have, and the way we're able to reach out. Yeah, you're right about that. That's going to be harder to replace, and they have tried. As your point is, companies have tried, and still. As a matter of fact, one of the articles I read about different ways different brokerages are handling this, on the listing side, there was a guy out west that had offered a tiered approach, and he had
right.
like bronze, silver, and gold packages or whatever. And for this price, you get this amount of service. For this price, you get this much service. And then for the regular price, what it always was, he does what he always did, right?
Yeah, I love that.
And 95% of the clients that he presented the new system to went with the most expensive service. But they knew
Yes.
their options. He gave them options which would satisfy, what this lawsuit was trying to satisfy. But when presented with options, they still chose the tried and true way, you know.
So I've been hearing a lot of people say this, and I agree with this, that the level of professionalism and expertise and knowledge and expectation of the real estate industry is going to have to go up. You're not going to be able to um, go in as somebody who's never sold a home before and just wing it, put a sign in the yard, it's going to be gone and no problem. That people are going to have higher expectations. They're going to want to know from you exactly what you're going to do, what value are you bringing, and the weaker agents are going to be filtered out through that process on the listing side. I think you and I both agree we don't really know what's going to happen on the buy side. It looks like this is open for some sort of a uh, Silicon Valley, solution where they're going to come up with like an Uber deal where you can sort of pay by the mile and go look at houses, and then you can pay an attorney to review the contract for you, and you can deal with the listing agent. It seems like some hybrid might come available. But on the list side, I agree. Like, you're going to want to trust a trusted professional to be able to give you the advice that you need in order to make those big decisions.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough. I haven't figured out how people are going to. Nobody's going to want strangers coming through their house unattended. And the one thing about the buyer
I'm
agency is,
glad you brought this up, Barry. Go ahead.
you know, you've got to have this idea that buyers are going to call the listing agent and schedule the showings themselves. Well, I'm here to tell you,
I'm here to
if,
tell you.
if you want me to be at every showing
I'm here
for
to tell you.
there's going to be a different price structure.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm glad you brought that
You
up
got to deal with that
because that
security.
makes perfect sense. By the way, I forgot, and this is something I talked about previously. 100%. If there's no buyer's agent, who's showing the houses?
Let's
Is the
show the
listing
house.
agent going to drive to your home every time a buyer calls up and says, "I want to see it"?
That's the way they did it 40 years ago, before you had the kind of marketing that you have now. You can't get people. I've actually had estate properties and different historic properties and whatever, where I was required to be there for every showing. And it makes it very difficult to schedule the showings. And it frustrated the buyer. Even when there was a buyer agent there, I had to be there. And it really cuts down on the number of showings.
It
Because
does.
really
It'll
decently
cut down
close.
on the exposure and the
Yeah.
opportunities. Like the house I just recently sold. You probably I don't you don't do you have any air bases or military bases nearby?
Yeah, Fort Detrick is 3 miles from my house. I mean, it's
So
huge.
we got
Uh,
Andrews, we got Pax River, and it is a very common scenario to have a client come in on a Thursday and expect to leave back on an airplane Monday with a house. And they are in a very tight time crunch. They're going to look at what's on the market. They're going to make a decision. They're going to put in an offer on the first one, then they're going to put an offer on the second one if they don't get it, and they're going to leave. And if you are a listing agent with 10 listings, how are you going to accommodate that type of a situation? Because maybe they're not available at the time you might be available. So I'm thinking about, you know, this house is available on Thursdays between 5 and 7 p.m. and every other Sunday between 2 and 4. And if you don't make that window, uh, I'm sorry about your luck.
that's essentially the way I handled that estate. I would have 2 days during the week, and when the agents called, I'd say, "Look, the window for showings is Saturday between 11 and 2. That's when
Yeah.
I'm going to be there, and I have to be there."
So we
And
have some comments. Somebody said home inspectors might be used for this role on showings. You have to be a licensed realtor to show properties. Um, maybe there are other people that would take, showing properties as a way to make money as a second job. You could work at a
yeah,
Redfin, and that's how Redfin model works. They have, you know, licensed realtors that show properties, but they're not always the ones that handle the negotiations and then all the
there's a
legwork.
door open. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, and that could be. I think it's going to go in the opposite. I saw a statistic the other day, and I didn't fact check it, but I was surprised that 73% of the people in our business are dual income, dual dual
Oh, I
career,
believe that. How
and
about yourself? I'm full. My sole family's
yeah,
income is based on this. I don't have another job. My wife doesn't work. Uh, this is it for
we
me.
don't
If
have
I
a
don't sell
retirement.
houses, we don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
we don't make money if we don't sell houses over here. So I'm all in,
right.
and I plan on staying in this business. I know you plan on staying in this business.
Yeah.
My sole advice is you need to learn how to become a great listing agent. You need to learn how to add value. You need to learn how to pull all the levers in order to make your clients the most money and show them how you do it, and then do it in front of them, and they're going to refer you. And
And what
outside of
you're
that,
1,000% right. And the thing I would add to that is that I think the market that we're headed into, we're going to learn that it takes more than becoming a TikTok star or a social media influencer or what the hell ever it is that these people do. Um,
that's what we're
it's
doing right now, Barry. We're live on YouTube and Facebook at the same time.
yeah, I know, but this isn't my main source of procuring business
Of
on social
course. Yeah, I
media.
don't get a ton
You
of
know
phone
what I'm
calls from these
talking about.
podcasts, by the way. I do it for fun, and I do it because I like to have these conversations. I feel like I have opinions, and I have good information. I like to be able to get it out. So that's why I had you on, man. You've been selling houses since the 80s, and you've seen the ups and the downs. So going back to your very first statement when you said, I don't know if this is going to change things a whole lot. I think maybe uh do you still feel that way? I mean, do
Well,
you really
no,
think that?
because I said that, and then 5 minutes later, I went into how I'm changing my buyer broker. Yeah, yeah. So it's just, that probably wasn't a real accurate way to start, because it is definitely on the buyer broker side. It's got to change things.
Yeah, so I just got another comment. Will it be more cutthroat on the seller side with agents using not having to pay buyers commission as their advantage to entice sellers to pick them over other realtors that won't want them to have to pay a commission and make the most return from selling a home? If that's the choice, if that's the way they structure it, I don't see how it would go another way. I mean, think about this. If you're local to an area and you're going to buy a house locally, like you're not flying in from Dallas, but you live here and you're looking around, maybe I'm looking at waterfront houses in my area and I'm trying to make the best offer. Is there some advantage to coming to the table and saying, yeah, you don't have to pay a real estate agent to take my offer? I don't see how you don't make that argument. I don't see how you don't make that decision.
No, you're going to do what the seller's going to do what's best for the seller.
But even as a buyer, like, am I
Right.
gonna tack on this person to open the doors for me to collect a fee that's gonna get in the way of me winning this deal? Because the biggest challenge in real estate is not selling your house, it's buying a house. I tell people that all the time. Like, if you think selling your house is hard, wait until you switch hats and you try to go buy one and you see what that's like.
Well,
Because
and think about this, because I thought about this the other day. Think about the people that are going to jump into the say, okay, because of all this, I'm not using a buyer agent. I'm going to do this on my own.
yeah,
And somehow they get to see some houses and whatever. And then they, two or three or four or five or 20 times, they get beat out because they don't structure the offer. Think about how many times has somebody called you, it's happened to me, and say, hey, Barry, listen, we were using a friend of ours who's a realtor. We've written 5 offers and we've gotten shut out. Would you consider, and it's you, I'm at the age where it's always the parents calling me saying, would you consider helping our child?
yeah,
We like this person they're using, but they just don't know how to get a deal done.
yeah.
And I'll say, listen, yeah, I want, and I always try to work out with the other agent so I'm not stepping on toes. And then I'll come in, and within 2 offers, we have them under contract.
100%. I talked to a guy the other day, my lender, who's working with this guy who wrote 23 offers. And I'm just going like, I can't believe that's a thing. You wrote 23 offers. Like, that is the craziest scenario. I want to say I have never written more than 5 for a client in my entire career. Over
23,
200.
you either got a client that won't listen or an agent that doesn't know what they're doing. I hate to say, but
I'm going to
that's
say that there's maybe a little bit of both, but I'm going to say that the client hasn't learned to take the advice of the realtor,
yep.
uh, and the realtor hasn't earned the right to be able to say, hey, listen, if you want to win this deal, here's how we got to do it. And the strategy that they're using is not working.
Yeah,
And somebody should have gotten fired. Like, I would fire my client.
right. If they're not listening after 23. But the point is, those people, they're going to circle back and say, oh, goodness, I guess I do need a buyer agent to represent me. And, you know, again, depending on where it ends up being with these fees, I think you're going to see a lot of them get negotiated out um, through the transaction. And maybe some of the money gets added to the price as long as you're in a situation where appraisals are strong, just like with seller help now, on your closing cost deals.
But,
Um,
the seller help on closing cost deals, and correct me if I'm wrong, if your market's different. Prior to 2019, 9 out of 10, average homes, these three, $400,000, $500,000 houses had 3% seller help, no problem. All right,
on
yep,
the
no
right,
problem.
on the right, yeah,
After 2019, it flipped the other way. 2021, I'm not sure if I saw that on any deal. And I'm not seeing that right now. I'm seeing maybe 30%, 40%, and it's not 3% anymore. It's like 1% or 2%. And and when that does happen, you see the sales price go up. So it's like even if they're paying it, they're not really paying it. The buyer's paying it.
right.
So
And
it's like
sometimes you're seeing the sales price go up anyway because it
yeah,
got bid up, right? So it's
yeah,
hard
yeah.
to know how much was a bid and how much was somebody had to pay, yeah, a
So let's
contribution. But
have an honest conversation with the general realtor community. What is the likelihood that they need to seriously consider another profession if they're buyer heavy?
oh, it's gonna if you're making your living on buyers, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna yeah, it's there's every time again, after 40 years, we go through these markets where things get really busy and really hot. And the one that we had where we had the big crash where, you know, we had people making $40,000 buying $500,000 house. I mean, you always know when the market gets to a point and people rush in because the barriers to entry in our industry are low. People rush in and they become agents. And then over time, they realize that, hey, this is an expensive business and it's not quite as easy as I thought it was going to be. And then when their fees come due at the end of the year, they drop out.
Yep.
I think we're going there's going to be some natural consolidation.
Well, this is not natural consolidation. This is a restructuring of the compensation
Well,
model that is going to force some people out.
yeah, because it's going to change that business model. I mean, right now, we have these big teams that have God knows how many people, and all they do is run buyers,
Yep.
and and it's because the amount of commission that's getting spread amongst, some goes to this one, some goes to that one. Yeah, I believe that's going to change. I believe that's going to
Yeah,
change.
I agree
That's
with you. I think we kind of agree on just about everything, Barry.
well, thank
And
God.
and
Then
and
we're
and
right.
to my point though about needing to update your resume and consider another job, I think that a lot of people are like, "Oh, everything's gonna be fine. We're just gonna this is nothing but opportunity, et cetera, et cetera." I'm really not so sure that's the case. I came into real estate from the IT business and I was there during the crash and then I saw what happened after the crash. And I think that I saw the writing on the wall and I got out of that business um, at exactly the right time. And I'm starting to look at this business and I'm not getting out of it, but it's because I'm a listing agent. If I was a buyer's agent, I would honestly consider what else I can do in order to make enough money to feed my family because I don't think that there's nobody saying everything's going to be okay. There's nothing out there that indicates there's not going to be major changes that will negatively affect the commission on the buyer's agent.
Well, this was done. You go back to the reason this was, and there are the lawsuits, the class action suits, but then there's also been some involvement from the Justice Department looking into this. Like I say, going back years, at the way
Yes.
commissions were struck. It's been going on for years. The purpose of this was to cause they thought real estate agents were making too much money on transactions. House prices had gone up, fees had gone up along with that. And I mean the intent of this whole thing was to essentially transfer money away from our industry back over to the home sellers and home buyers. That was and so that's what it's going to do for
Okay. Well, let
sure.
me ask you then. Everybody thinks that um, that is going to sort of decimate the the 6% commission, which is not even real. And
Right.
they think that it's going to somehow help buyers and sellers. Do you see any scenario in which this helps buyers? Like, I can't even think of a way this would help a buyer. Can you see any way
I
this would
think
help a buyer?
ultimately it may help some sellers.
It'll
Um,
help some sellers potentially because it's going to offload some fees, like maybe they don't have to pay a full commission, whatever that is, to a listing agent. But the listing agent is then going to have to take on the responsibility of dealing with buyers. I feel like if that is the case, imagine, and you've done this before, having to deal with a knucklehead buyer who's unrepresented, who you have to now explain things to as the fiduciary for the seller, and not, be able to give them real advice. Like, you have to say, here's what we're not going to do. Here's what we're not going to do. No, you can't do that. And these people are just not, there's no frame of reference. They've maybe bought one other house in their lifetime. They're looking at it like they're buying, a car. And it's like the nightmare that's going to present, where you're going to have to deal with the sellers and the buyers as the
well, and the
listing agent.
liability, when you do that, there's been a lot of times when I have a listing and I'll have a buyer come directly to me, that I'll refer that buyer to another agent, um, so that I can be sure they have and what we say to them is, we can't represent you, but we can help you. I can manage the sale, but I can't represent you. There's been a lot of times where I've said to them, listen, I'm going to give you a couple of names. These are agents I've worked with that are really good. You should have representation.
That's good advice. That's very
Because the way the business model was before, that money that I'm going to share with that buyer broker would have gone to me. It wasn't going to revert back to the seller. It wasn't going to help the seller. It was
right.
going to help me. And to me, I'd rather spread the liability and have somebody responsible for taking care of that buyer. It's going to be different now. This is
Well,
going to
I
be
could make the argument in that exact situation. This is what I do make the argument to my clients. And then Rob asked about giving out referrals now. If you give a referral out to another agent and that agent's going to charge 3% or 4% or whatever, will that change your perspective on referring that client to them? Because it's now putting the buyer in a lesser situation. I don't know how to answer that question because we haven't been faced with that situation before.
we
Like,
don't know
so,
yet. The answer is we don't know yet because
yeah,
we haven't gotten to that yet. Right.
yeah. But going back to this sort of giving out this buyer, what I tell sellers is, in the event that a buyer calls me and says, I'd like to buy the house, and in your mind, you're wondering, is there going to be some conflict of interest? What I say is that, as your fiduciary and the person who's responsible for getting you the most money, I think it's advantageous to you that they're unrepresented, because now the only person talking to them is the person who represents you.
That's true.
And if somehow having a buyer's agent is going to net you more money, I can make that argument, but I don't see how that would necessarily work out, because I can make the argument on why they should buy your house at this price maybe better than a buyer's agent can. You know what I mean?
I think
So
it's a really, really good point.
yeah,
Yeah. And I wouldn't disagree with that.
yeah. So it's going to change everything, in my opinion. I think that, and then the last thing we could talk about real quick, do you have any bead on why this is all happening and what this sort of, people are calling it a conspiracy? It seems like it came out of nowhere, where the Justice Department and then these multiple lawsuits came at the exact same time, and they are, making accusations. We're not going to get into that, but it wasn't exactly true what they were accusing the real estate industry of, as far as I can tell. They were saying that there was some sort of collusion and conspiracy. I really don't see, you've been in the business. I'm sure you've never been told. I mean, you're your own broker, but you've never been told how much you have to charge somebody or how to negotiate your own commission.
Correct.
Who's the, anytime there's a conspiracy, the only ones that I believe in are the ones where you can follow the money. Who's winning in this? Like, who's making out? What industry is trying to move in? Somehow they've finagled the Justice Department to move in. Like, how is this? Where's this even coming from? Why? I don't know that, you can say this every time you go to settlement. Aren't most of the clients happy with their realtors when it's all said and done? Like, I don't think there's been this upheaval of the buyers and sellers. So where's this coming from?
I don't know. The only thing that there, I just assume there must have been something, amongst sellers where they didn't understand how the commissions were working. Yeah, I will say this: if we have any fault in this, there have been times when we've promoted buyer agency as it's being free. And when I say we, I mean the real estate community in general.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to have a buyer because it's free. Well, nothing's free. But but what we were trying to say is it's not going to cost you anything out of your pocket.
I mean,
And
that's a true statement.
and that is a true statement. And it's good for you to be protected. That's a true statement.
Again.
Again, so there's that. And I do think, again, maybe we've gotten a little slap happy with listed and sold in 24 hours. I had 47 offers and I got 50,000 over. We've gone from promotion of our services to a kind of look at me, between whether it's social media, whether it's these TV shows on HDTV that don't reflect anything having to do with any real estate industry I've ever been involved in. Their TV shows, but I think that there must be some resentment built up towards our industry.
There
That
is.
these people make all this money, they don't do that much work. Houses sell themselves. Do I really need you? I mean, I've heard all that stuff. You've heard all that stuff.
Well, so what I would argue with in that point is that to some extent that's true, but that's also that's a result of the market being a seller's market for like 10 years in a row. So the value that an agent brings doesn't feel the same as it did in 2014 when the average days on the market was 135 and you were competing against 20 other houses and you're desperately trying to get out of here and your house will not sell and you're on your third real estate agent and you call me and
Yep.
like, I can't sell this house. The conversation and the sort of way that we're positioned was a lot different. And I think that that
Well,
idea
nobody
that
ever looks at it when it's going the other. One of my buddies, he loves to give me a hard time, and his point is, look, real estate's going up 40% over the last 8 or 10 years, which means your fees have gone up 40%, and you're not doing anything different than you were then. And my response is, yeah, you know what? Back in 07, 08, when the market cratered and prices came down, and not only were sales slower, but our fees went down 30% just because the value of the property. You weren't worried about me then. You weren't
yes,
worried that I wasn't making enough. So, I'm in an industry that fluctuates with the market. But
yes,
well,
and it's fluctuated right now. Sales are down 75%.
right.
So if anybody wants to call me to sell their house or call Barry if you live in the Frederick area, like we're tried and true professionals here.
It's
And I think that the perception of what we do because of how fast houses sell is the biggest thing that has caused this opinion. And if it wasn't the case, and if it was hard to sell a house and you felt like you needed this real estate agent who was a go-getter and was willing to do whatever it takes to sell your house, everybody's perception would be a lot different.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I think you're exactly right.
Well, I think we covered everything, man. Oh, the last thing, and someone just made this comment about steering clients, and this was sort of another, you know, misconception that real estate agents will steer their clients towards higher commission sales. Do you go in the MLS and sort them by how much money you're making and show them those houses first?
The answer to that is, if that was true, I'd never sell a new home, because
Amen on that.
who pays the worst commissions in the world? New home builders, and the bigger the builder, the worse the commissions.
Amen. Ryan
So
Holmes is offering like $2,000.
you own $1 million house. I mean, it's insane. So the answer is, good agents. I learned this a long time ago in the home building world. If you put, in that time, it was the company first, your client first. If you put the people that are paying your bill, you're paying your salary first, you put those interests ahead of yours at all times and make sure they're taken care of, everything else works out. And you're good agents, you're really quality agents. Through my whole career, that's what they did. They didn't worry about, what was the percent. They would they would take their clients to whatever was the best. And that's what I do now. I still sell new homes. I know when I walk in the door that I'm going to end up getting paid 15 cents an hour. But
And that's if your client hasn't visited that home 10 years ago and wrote their name on a list somewhere. Now they're going to cut you out of the deal completely just
completely,
because.
you're right.
Yeah,
So the answer is, yeah. I think that steering to the highest price thing is,
it's a myth.
that's a myth. And yeah, I've never heard of anybody. That's why people don't pay bonuses. Back 20 years ago, used to be a big thing. If you had a property that wasn't selling, you'd offer $1,000 or $3,000 bonus, and that never worked. What you
No.
was, you give the incentive to the buyer, because
Yes.
the agent doesn't decide. And particularly now, it's like we talked about before. The clients tell me what they want to see. Very, very few of my clients depend on me to say, this is what we're going to go see on Saturday. They send me a list and say,
Yeah.
these are the ones I want to see. Set it up.
That's a huge misconception right there, is that real estate agents pick the houses for the clients, and maybe some do. And you were talking about how your client wants you to hand pick them. What
Once
I
in a while.
normally do is I say, listen, we need to keep our net broad as we possibly can. I'm going to send you all of the houses, coming soon, on the market, maybe some off the market properties. You get to decide which ones you want to go see. I could care less which house you buy. I only hope you love it. That's all I want you to do. And the one you really love, I'm going to help you get it. And that's my commitment to you, is I have some strategies on how we're going to win these deals. And that's really it.
And in most cases, the buyers are so attached to their home shopping app that they send me the listings before I have a chance to send them the listings. That's just
Well, if you
because
if you
they're
set that
fired
thing
up.
up to do that 15-minute notification, you get them first from me, and I say, listen, instead of you having to scroll, let me just send you an email. I'll hit you within 15 minutes of it hitting the market. My advice for anybody who's listening, if you are a home buyer, do it that way and go see it within however many hours you can get to it. Get the offer ready, be
Right.
familiar with the market, go look at a bunch of houses so that when the time comes and you're ready to make a decision, be mentally prepared for offering whatever it takes to get it, and you know what you're willing to do.
Absolutely.
We could talk about this all day, man. So we're 1 hour in, so I think we probably need to wrap, man. But it's been great talking to you. So just to kind of set this up, you hit me up and said, hey, you want to do the podcast? We called each other on the phone and started talking. I said, let's just have this conversation live. That way you don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know what you're going to say. It went well. I think that we kind of covered all the bases. you know, you've been doing this thing since the 80s and we agree on everything. That makes me feel better. it does not make me feel great about the future of the buyer's agents or this industry in general. It seems like somebody's a little bitter and wants to blow us up like they do the it feels almost political, like just burn this thing down because I'm angry. It's like, really? Because if you burn this down, what you're going to end up with is you're going to have to find a house without an agent, and best of luck with that, because I'm not driving 45 minutes to go show it to you if I'm the listing agent, unless I know
Right.
you're really actually going to probably buy it, and then you're going to be on my time.
Yeah. It's good talking to you, man. I enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, you got a lot of wisdom. I appreciate you jumping on. You got a lot of cojones, because a lot of agents that I've talked to said, I don't really want to go online and talk about it, man. You stepped right up and you're like, yeah, I'll talk about it. I think I talked to you 5 minutes before we turned the camera on. You were like, let's go. So kudos to you, man. If you're in the Frederick area, or if you're a realtor watching this and you got a referral for that area, Barry is the man. I think I gave you a referral like 5 years ago. You closed the deal. You did a great job. I think that's how we know each other, if that's
I
right.
think so. Yeah. All right,
Hey,
buddy.
man, it was
Take
good
care. Good
talking to you.
talking to you, man.
Yes, thank you, sir.
See you.